My name is Aizu John Agnes. I am a beneficiary of the August project, which is known as TAP. I have the TAP code TAP 2.2.172.20.B0600. I enrolled for the course known as Intellectual Capacity Building, which is known as ICB. Under this course, we did 6 modules, and module 1 says Introduction to the Concept of Knowledge. We spoke about knowledge. What is knowledge? Knowledge is known as a comprehension of facts, descriptions, informations, skills. And under knowledge, we say, okay, knowledge could be factual, knowledge could be practical, knowledge could be acquired by acquaintance. Factual knowledge is the kind of knowledge that requires facts. These are the knowledge that we learn by getting facts. For instance, you go to a textile industry, and you check in you go into their factory, and you need to touch a fabric to determine whether it is silk, whether it is cotton, or whatever textile it might be made of. And also we were taught about practical knowledge. This is the kind of knowledge that is acquired by practice, like you cooking, by driving a car. When you need to practice it all times, is known as practical knowledge. And also we were taught knowledge by acquaintance. This is the knowledge that is being acquired by familiarity. Maybe you are familiar with the road to the office, you are familiar with your mom, you're familiar with your car, and so many other things. And also we were taught epistemology, which is the study of the nature of knowledge. And under epistemology, it was divided into empirism and rationality, in which empirism is the knowledge that originates from our senses or through experiences, while rationalism is the knowledge that originates from reasoning. And also we're taught 6 steps to critical thinking. What is critical thinking? Critical thinking is an active and persistent mental process of observing, analyzing, and understanding, and reflecting to guide our understanding and decision making. What is critical thinking? We have 6 steps to critical thinking, in which in critical thinking the 6 steps are: you observe. First of all, the first step is you observe, the second step is you analyze, the third step is you evaluate, the fourth step you question, the fifth step you contextualize, and the sixth step you reflect. That's a summary of the module 1. And we have under ICB the module 2 says Introduction to the Concept of Intelligence. What is intelligence? It is the ability to learn, understand, and make judgments and have opinions that are based on reasoning. And under this intelligence, we looked at 3 different theories. We looked at the theory of general intelligence by Charles Spearman, in which he talked about the G factor, saying that yes, intelligence is general, meaning that if one is intelligent in one aspect, the person can be said to be intelligent in other aspects. And in this case, he put an example of an athlete who is good in running. Was actually seen that okay, if he is good in running, he can also be good in any other physical activity, such as jumping and the rest. But once it comes to mental activity, will the person also be active? And also the second theory, we looked at the Carter-Horn theory of fluid and crystallized intelligence. And the third kind of theory, we looked at the theory of multiple intelligence by Howard Gardner, in which we talk about interpersonal intelligence, intrapersonal intelligence, naturalistic, existential, and so many other intelligence that we looked at. And also we looked at emotional intelligence, where we say, okay, emotions are internal, and also emotions are, we infer them in ourselves and others. We looked at the components of emotions. We looked at feelings, body arousal, sense of purpose, and social expressiveness. Under emotional intelligence, it's conceptualized as the ability, the traits, and the mixed model, in which the ability model was actually given by Meyer and Salovey, 1997. The trait model was given by Rovenbaum, and the mixed model was given by Goleman. Module 3, we were taught introduction to inductive and deductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning, in which one has to go from the specifics to the general. We look at the premises. We say the premises can be a statement of facts. The premise can be a previous event, can be a data, can be anything that is a premise. So in the inductive, we say, okay, fine, the premise, if the premise is true, the conclusion may not always be true. And in inductive reasoning, we go from the specific to the general, and in which an example was cited when we say Sarah is late to work. That's specific, that's the premise, and it's been concluded that Sarah is late to everywhere. Yes, the premise Sarah is late to work is correct or may be correct, but the conclusion that Sarah is always late to everywhere, may not be correct. So this is what inductive reasoning has to do. And also we spoke about the deductive reasoning, in which you say, okay, it goes from the general to the specific. Now let's use the previous example of the inductive reasoning, which you say Sarah is late to everywhere, being the premise, and being the conclusion rather, and Sarah is late to work. In this case, in the deductive case, we're going to make Sarah is late to everywhere as the premise, and Sarah is late to work as the conclusion. You'll find out that Sarah is late to everywhere. Yes, everywhere includes work or any other place. That makes both the conclusion and the premise very correct, makes it correct. But in the case of the inductive reasoning, it is not so. In the inductive reasoning, the premise may be true and the conclusion may not be true. But always in the deductive reasoning, the premise is always true. If the premise is true, then the conclusion will always be true. And in Module 4, we taught the introduction to dual thought processes. In this dual thought process we taught about cognitive processes, in which we had the type 1 and the type 2 cognitive processes. And we looked at it that in the type 1 cognitive process, we see that it is preconscious, it is fast, it is automatic, it is prone to mistake, and it has very high capacity. In the type 1 process, we see that yes, this one is very fast. It is something that you don't need to think. Just for instance, I want to give an instance of one seeing a snake. When you see a snake, you don't need to start thinking, you don't need to start to think that, okay, fine, is that what is the snake doing? What does the snake want to do? But because in our preconscious mind, we've always known that yes, sighting a snake is a sign of danger. The first thing we want to do is to flee or to cause alarm, or as in there's always a sense of fear in us. And so that is what type 1 is. It's already registered in us. It's already there. it is preconscious. We don't need to start thinking about it. Sometimes we just find out that we are doing this thing. It's not because we thought about it, but because it is already registered in our memory. And we look at the type 2 cognitive processing, which we need to, it is conscious, you need to think about it. It is controlled. It is something that, yes, you need to, it has very low capacity. It is not automatic, that it is controlled. You need to, yes, you need to think about it. It involves reasoning. It involves reasoning. Unlike the type 1, when one sees a moving vehicle with high speed coming towards oneself, we just realize that, oh, the next thing is to avoid the car or to move away from the scenario. But in the case of the type 2 cognitive process, you need to think. Standing in the middle of the road and coming before the person is a fast moving vehicle. For the type 1 cognitive process, the preconscious mind will just move the person, tell the person, okay, fine, just get out of the way of the moving vehicle. But the type 2 process will now have to think, okay, what should I do? And in the process, before the person will even think about this, the car has already hit the person. So for the type 2 cognitive process, it is very slow, it is controlled, it involves reasoning skills, it is logical, it involves very low capacity, and it cannot do so many things. It cannot do so many things. It cannot evaluate so many things. It cannot evaluate so many things for a long time. And also we're taught intuition and rationalism, in which we look at it that rationalism is controlled. Why rationalism is controlled? Why intuition is the sum of our knowledge and our experience. In this we have a pitfall of intuition, in which we know that, yes, intuition is the ability to understand or know something immediately based on our feelings rather than facts. The last word, or will I say the last statement there, which says rather than facts, means that even our intuitions may be very, very wrong, may be wrong. There's something we know has been counter-intuitive, when your feelings is telling you that, oh, that is what is happening. And if you tend to get the facts about it, you now find that what you actually thought was happening there was not what was actually happening. And also, under the same module 4, which is introduction to dual thought processes, we looked at negative bias, anchoring bias, illusory correlation, in which so many times if you look at negative bias, is a kind of bias that maybe when we go for something, or we go for an event, or we perform a task, even if a lot of people should applaud us, should say so many positive comments about us, and there's just a few negative comments, our mind, our state of mind is keen to hold on to those negative comments faster and deeply than the positive ones. In this case, we say, okay, fine, that person has a negative bias, that person has had the negative bias. And also we look at anchoring bias. Anchoring bias is a kind of bias that we use our previous knowledge, we use an existing information to judge other things. Just for instance, which a lot of our parents have actually been doing for a long time. When a female child, especially a teenager, probably is sick, the first thing that comes into the mind of the mother is, this girl might be pregnant, even without actually going to find facts about it. She might just say, okay, because every other child, this is how the symptom of pregnancy. Meanwhile, it might be something else that must have been going on with this girl. But because there is no facts about it, because of the previous or existing information that person has already had in his or her brain will tend to like give judgments about something due to the previous or existing information that the person already have. And we also talked about illusory correlation. In this case, when a child fails, maybe a child failed his or her own exams, maybe the parent has been checking out the child, has been checking out the activity of the child, and has always been seeing the child to be playful at home. Maybe the parent will say go and read, and he or she is not reading, always playing ball, always watching cartoons. And when the results of the child comes out, the parents automatically just conclude that yes, it's because I told you to always read your books, and you have not been reading, you have been watching cartoons, you have been playing games. That's why the exam of the child was failed. So in that kind of case, we'll say okay, the parent has actually concluded, has already committed what we know as illusory correlation, because the mother did not get enough facts, did not get enough information as to know whether the child actually likes the subject, if the teacher is actually giving out enough information about the subject to the child, if the child actually has interest, or maybe there's, as in the parent has to find so many facts to be actually sure that what could be happening, why did this child fail this particular subject, instead of just judging and assuming that because the child has been constantly watching TV or watching cartoons, that is why the child failed the exam. And we did in our module 5, we did introduction to bounded rationality in behavioral economics. In this, we're taught that okay, fine, that when we come across things, what do we do when somebody brings a business to us? What does our mind what does it say, or what does our mind think? And in this, we're giving an example of getting a share. Module 5.0, we're taught introduction to bounded rationality in behavioral economics. In module 6.0, we're taught introduction to discerning points of view and its impact on African consciousness. In this, we're exposed to so many things about the African continent, about the Ishango bone. Sincerely, I never knew of anything known as Ishango bone, the oldest pyramids, which are the pyramids of Sudan, which are even more older and more than the pyramids of Egypt. So many exposures, so many things that happened in the African history in which we are not aware of. But one part that actually got my attention was the Berlin Conference, which was our assignment. In this case, the Berlin Conference, also known as the Congo Conference, where the European powers and the whites sat together. The European powers and the whites sat together to divide Africa, and they were taking decisions on who was going to take which land to divide Africa, with a map of Africa with them. This was going on between the European powers and the United States to divide Africa in a fair and civilized way, to dividing our native lands. Even Africa was not involved. Africa was not involved in this conference, was not involved in this meeting, and they all sat at a table with the map of Africa and decided what was going to happen, who was going to get what territory, and the agreements about the trade. And I was wondering that what could have happened. Why were the African leaders not present at this conference? Yes, as at that time there was slave trade going on, but at least people must have risen up to counter them. But in this case, this was a conference that they all sat down to take a decision about Africans. And with this conference, it had positive and negative impacts. The positive impact was that slave trading actually stopped, but it didn't stop, because even the king of Congo still enslaved the Africans that lived around to gather the natural resources. But the negative impact was more than the positive impact that we saw or we claim happened to us. There were loss of land, there were enslavement even in our territories, enforcement of a new culture, our culture. We had to leave our culture, we had to leave our religion. We became exposed to European diseases and so many things. This Berlin conference played a significant role in our lives and lifestyle as Africans, because our culture and way of living was forced away from us, and new religion, new education was enforced on us. So many things, our natural resources was taken away from us and all that. Right now, it's a thing for us to sit down and think that, okay, relate the past with the present. Even as we are Republicans now, even as we are Republicans, are we sure we are democratic, we are Republicans? Are we sure that the mindsets that these European powers and the United States had on us, the mindsets they had on us then when we were under them, are we sure we are not still replicating it? Are we sure we are not still enslaving ourselves even by ourselves? That's why the state of mind is something that is the state of mind is something so critical that we need to actually work on. That's why this course, intellectual capacity building, is actually coming up, so that yes, before we conclude, we need to read about so many things. We don't just accept things as people would say. We don't just accept junks. We are not dumping grounds that people will just pick up junks from nowhere and dump into our minds. We should read, we should evaluate it, we should analyze it, we should have this critical thinking about everything. We should get facts before we conclude on anything. The intellectual capacity building has actually helped me in a way that I can sit down and I can think critically. I can analyze things very well, even before taking a decision, even before doing things. It has exposed me to not to conclude about some things, but rather to get more facts about things, to get more informations before making a decision or before concluding about any statement. Thank you.